What is the most destructive lie we've been told about our divinity?
Wow, that is a big question. I think to answer that question, James, we need to take about a half step back and define what divinity is, because I know I'm learning that that word means different things to different people. For some people, it's a charged word. It comes with a little bit of baggage because many people wrap the term divinity around religion, or I should say, wrap religion around divinity. And again, I can see where that would happen. There are schools dedicated to divinity, and they're good schools. They do good things. It's a perspective. The conversation we're going to have, I think it's good to define divinity right off the bat. The contemporary definition, you can look it up on, in the contemporary dictionaries, surprise a lot of people. Divinity is our ability, the human ability, to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. Has nothing to do with religion, although the power that we have to transcend those limitations, I could see where religions would want to be linked to those kinds of powers. Because in all honesty, as we'll discuss, there are literally godlike powers that we were imbued with mysteriously when we appeared in this world 200,000 years ago. So divinity, the ability to transcend, means to become more than. Perceived limitations, and I love talking about this, and this is really the essence of every guest you've ever had. Uh, Perceived limitations are the limits that we place upon ourselves, the limits that we believe to be true about what's possible for us in our lives. Those limits come from our family, from our society, from our culture. They come from our religions. They come from science, obsolete science that's not kept current. They come from our own personal experience where we may have had a bad time in the past. We allow that to define us in the future. So I love the term divinity because it implies that we are given the ability to become more than the limits that we've placed upon ourselves. So the biggest lie, I think, that we have been indoctrinated to accept as a society for hundreds and at least a couple of thousand years is that we do not have divinity, is that we are powerless victims of a flawed form of life. The best science of the modern world. This is what they're teaching our kids in school today, young people. Um, and my generations as well. We're taught that carbon-based life in general and human life specifically is a flawed form of life. And among those flaws are things like human emotion that can cloud our perceptions and our logic and our judgment and our decision making, um, and our ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, that those somehow get in the way of making good decisions. So we're taught that we are a flawed form of life. And when you're teaching young people that they are incomplete and that they are flawed, it says they need something outside of themselves to compete in the world and to be the best version of themselves. In our 21st century lives, that something is being touted as technology. So what we're witnessing is an unprecedented momentum to replace our natural biology with synthetics, with AI. Of course, we all know that. Artificial intelligence. It goes a lot deeper than probably what many people have come to understand. AI, computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips under the skin, nanosensors running through the body. And don't get me wrong, I'm a high tech guy. When I was working in the corporations during the Cold War years, late 70s through the early 90s, I was involved with some of the most advanced technologies this world has ever seen. I don't talk a lot about that unless it comes up. But I was working in the defense industry through a very circuitous route. I didn't apply for a job to work in defense. I applied for a job to work in technology. to explore the stars with the companies that were doing that at the time. They hired me, I got my security clearance, and all of a sudden they said, well, you're hired, but we need you not on the exploration space side of the house, but on the defense side of the house because we're in the Cold War. And so I ended up on projects like Star Wars Defense Initiative, SDI, and some of our viewers probably remember there was Brilliant Pebbles was one of the Star Wars offshoots, and space-based lasers and advanced communications. And I mean, it was just an amazing time to be in the industry. One of the things that I learned, and this is going to be reflected through the conversation we have, is that as advanced as those technologies are, James, and they're just amazing to this day, I have yet to see anything built outside of the human body that does not reflect or mimic principles that we already embody within our own cells and our own systems, except we do it better. And I have a new book comes out at the end of this month. It's called Pure Human. And it is a celebration of our humanness to say just that we are on the precipice of giving our humanness away to technology before we even know fully what it means to be human, before we embrace our divinity. And this isn't about religion. This is about our species. And there is a growing momentum to do just that, to replace the human body with technology. I've had people say to me, you know, what's the problem? Why would that be a problem? Who have never had the opportunity to understand what we're talking about the gift of our humanness, what it means to be human, and the extraordinary and in many cases dormant or latent potentials that we have within us. So what people don't really understand, they say, okay, let's put computer chips in the brain. Let's just take that for example. There are proposals by the year 2030 to implant every newborn in Western society with a computer chip in the brain. The argument is it will give them the edge and allow them to compete in this technological world. That's the reason it's being given. Of course, there's a lot going on behind the scenes there. And so people say, what would be wrong with that? Well, many people don't understand about biology is that we are an on-demand form of life. The demand that our body and our systems experience is what elicits the biology to continue. Many people, the adage is use it or lose it. We've all heard that. So I'm just going to give a quick example of one of the studies that has come out in recent years, when the old thinking was that we are born into this world with a finite number of brain cells. It's a fixed number. And, you know, choices you make in your life, recreational drugs, alcohol, things like that, will destroy those brain cells. And you've only got so many to begin with. Well, this isn't an excuse for the recreation, but what the new studies are showing is that there's a part of the brain that continues to produce brain cells until the last breath of our life in this world. It's called the hippocampus. Mm-hmm. And this is a surprise to many scientists, many neurologists. But there's a catch to that production. Yes, the brain produces those cells. If they are not engaged in a meaningful way within about a week, within about 7 days, the cells begin to atrophy and they die because the cells sense that they're not needed because the body's not using them. Well, if you've got computer chips in the brain, I want to talk about how they work here in just a moment. If you got a computer chip in the brain that is performing the functions that neurons in the neocortex used to do, then we know exactly what that impact is going to be. And there's studies that are actually showing that these things are happening now through AI, virtual reality visors, extended use, young kids, and all of that. So the cells begin to atrophy and die because they're not being used. That principle applies well beyond the brain. It applies to every system in the body. It applies to the immune system. If something is mimicking or replicating or trying to create immunity for us. Our body does not produce our own natural immunity in the same way. Same with sexual reproduction. I mean, it goes on and on and on because this is the way our bodies work. So the thinking that it's a good thing in mass for everyone to replace their biology with this technology, from my perspective, is very concerning. I think it's a dangerous path for humankind to take. We only recently have had the technology that leads this to be a concern. So there is a concerted movement now to do just that. And, I know it's happening. And I'm still, I just saw some of the ads on a YouTube video. I'm still in awe of how attractive that the professional marketing people make it to give our humanness away to machines. They make it look really sexy. They make it look really fun. They make it look really attractive. So just an example of Sweden is kind of leading the West in terms of adopting some of this technology into the human body. I believe they are leading the world in terms of the adoption of RFID chips into the human body for everyday use. So here's what the ad. Here's the commercial. There's a guy walking down the street, and he looks happy. There's happy music in the background. Birds are singing, sky's blue, and he doesn't have a briefcase, doesn't have a billfold, doesn't have any car keys, and he says he's never felt freer in his life. He has 15 RFID chips embedded into his body. And each of those, so you go to the office and one of those chips unlocks your security door. And another one, you go to the ATM, and that is your, opens your bank account. You go to the grocery store and you scan your wrist over the scanner and you pay for your groceries, because it's all linked in to a centralized database run by AI. And they make it look very attractive. Now, there are companies where employees are, this is the way business is being done now, according to the ads. I haven't been to Sweden. This is what the ads are showing. Now, U.S. military for a number of years has had the option of having an RFID tag before they go into combat. And from my point of view, that's a whole different world, whole different perspective. I think it may make a lot of sense. If someone's, injured in a battlefield, all that information, they don't have to rely on dog tags that can be lost or broken, bent up or whatever. So that's different. But I'm talking about in mass, all citizens every day using this kind of information, all built into a centralized database. The price of that kind, and this is what we're being told, that we will be free, we will be safe, life will be easier. And those are the taglines that are being used. The price is that we are being asked to relinquish the very essence of our biology, the very essence of our humanness. And there are deep implications. There are deep spiritual implications we'll probably get into. There are certainly deep biological implications in terms of whether or not that is good for a species. In case we don't get to it, it's not. These things are not good for us. And I'm going to say that line a number of times when we talk about the adoption of changes we're being asked to make for climate change, for example. When you look at the end result, they're not good for us humans. When you look at the wars that are being waged, and we're being encouraged to escalate and enter into more and more wars where we deplete our resources, we deplete our armaments, we deplete the number of people that are able to fight and defend this world, the net result is that the nations of the earth are depleting their ability to defend themselves, and it will take years to replenish those resources. That's not good for us. The kinds of changes that we're being asked to make socially, the freedoms, divinity is closely linked to freedom and sovereignty. and the freedoms that are being lost are not good for us. And now the replacement of the human body with technology and the loss of our ability. So now let's go back to the definition of divinity. Divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. When we give our biology away, our biology is the link to our divinity. We cannot access divinity without cells and neurons and DNA. Synthetics are not able to access divinity. Are they alive? It's a form of life, but it's not the full complement. So being asked to replace our biology with technology is being asked to relinquish our ability to experience human divinity. That's not good for us. None of these things are good for you and me and humankind. So you have to ask, if it's not good for us, who's it good for? That's a whole conversation that we could have, and we can go down that rabbit hole. But I want to stay with divinity for right now, because this is up for everybody. This isn't like some futuristic stuff.
Mhm.
The proposals to accomplish many of the things that require us to give our power away to technology all have an expiration date, and we're looking at the year 2030. It's only about 5 years from now. Now, where's that number come from? There are so many ways to approach that. There are cosmological cycles that converge in the year 2030. The United Nations has identified the year 2030 when they want to remake the world. They want to remake society through what they call 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are deceptive. You look at the goals on the outside, they're all beautiful goals. James and I was deceived for a period of time in my life with these, because they're the goals to create food security for the world and end poverty and eradicate disease. You know, who doesn't want those things? We all do. Where it's concerning is you look at the fine print and how they plan to achieve those goals, and it is nothing less than a horrendous remake of the entire world outside of our bodies, but also for the first time, a remake of the world inside of our bodies. And they want to do this within 5 years. So they've got the 2030 goal. The World Economic Forum has identified the 2030 goal as a year when they hope to accomplish their vision, and they have now teamed up with the UN so that together they can work with this. They now have lobbyists, just like pharmaceutical lobbies and oil and gas lobbies. They now have lobbyists for the U.S. Congress, trying to get Congress to pass the legislation to implement many of these, not just outside of our bodies again, but these inside of our bodies. And they've got really deceptive names. And the general public that may not have, I mean, who's got time to look into all this stuff? You know, I mean, it takes me full time, and I still haven't even scratched the surface, I don't think. But most people don't have the time to really understand where we're going. What people do know is that something's up. Something is afoot. The world has changed. The world's changing very quickly. It's not the world that we used to know, certainly. And it's not that change is bad if the change is benevolent. If the change is being made by powers and forces and organizations that have our best interest in mind, that love and care for we humans and our families. There's nothing wrong with that kind of change. When the change is based on power and control and greed, and now the technology is available to successfully accomplish power and control and greed on levels that are just unimaginable. That's a dangerous combination, and that's kind of where we are right now. So that was a long answer to a short question. I think the biggest lie is that we don't have divinity, that we're powerless victims of the world around us, that we need something outside of ourselves to make life better. Does that make sense if I say
I
it
have
that
one
way?
favor to ask of you. Over 95% of the people that tune into this podcast are not yet subscribed. And whether it's your first time here or you are a regular listener of the show, I just ask that you hit that button. We've grown over 880% this past year, and I know we are destined to impact so many people in this year of 2025. And the way we're going to do that is by you hitting that subscribe button, you sharing it with a friend that you think will get value from the show, you leave a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, you leave a comment, a like on this post, and that you get it out to more people, because that is the way we're going to impact more and more people. And the way that I'm going to return the favor to you is by getting more and more guests on the show to help you expand your mind, question your beliefs, and really help you open your mind up to how good this life can really get. And I'm going to do that by having interviews and conversations with exceptional people. And it's just going to get better and better. And I hope that you stick along for the journey and then you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Let's hop into the interview. Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, this topic is something that, like you said, it isn't talked enough about, and I think most people don't have the time to invest into it. And I don't think people would be able to understand it because we can't understand our divinity as itself, right? We don't even know what it means to be fully human.
Yeah.
So how could we even think that staying human, fully human, would be the correct path forward? It seems as though the right path is
Yeah.
to keep evolving.
Well, this, it's part of a bigger story. I don't know how deep you want to go with this.
Real deep.
Do I have your permission? Can we go a little deeper beyond the
Absolutely.
obvious?
Absolutely.
I think we've got the time to flesh this out. The things we're talking about, our young people are being indoctrinated to have very little respect for their bodies. They're given no reason to not put harmful things inside and to do harmful things outside of their bodies, because the human body, carbon-based life, is denigrated in our society. Carbon is denigrated. We've been led to believe that carbon is bad and it's a harmful thing. We are carbon-based life. Our planet is based on carbon, and the misinformation, intentional misinformation and disinformation around fossil fuels has led to a lot of that. That's a whole conversation. I've got many videos on that. And just to be clear, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. And we've had the technology to do it for over 70 years. And this tells me if the powers that be were really serious about weaning us from a fossil fuel society, that we would have implemented those technologies in the last 70 years. But I also want to say the carbon is not what's driving the climate change. And the real science, not the pop scientists, but the real scientists know that. And they've been, I was a geologist 1970s, 1979. We were saying, man, we need to get ready because we're approaching this climate cycle. Are we contributing to it? You have to say that we may be contributing to some degree because we're putting stuff in the air. But NASA has come out recently. Two things. First, they have said Earth is greener than it has been in over 20 years because of the additional carbon dioxide, which is good for life.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystery, and this is the scientists are having a hard time with this, is the warming of our planet is not coming from the atmosphere down. It's coming from subsurface up. The oceans are warming from underneath. The glaciers are melting from underneath because of geologic processes that are happening in the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core that are processes that are known and understood. They just don't happen very often. And that over 90% of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not coming from us, it's coming from the oceans. And it's coming from the oceans because they are being warmed. So this is basic physics. Cold water holds more gas. And as the water warms, those molecules start to move faster, and it's called outgassing. It releases the gas. So as the oceans warm, they hold, that's our carbon sink. Forests and the oceans are what absorbs the carbon dioxide. And as the oceans warm, CO2 is being released in the atmosphere I've got a couple of YouTube videos that we've done a number of lectures on that, and I believe it is a reference. It's not a focus, but it's a sidebar, and I do give it a reference in the new book, so people can see what those studies are all about. And these are not the highest levels. I might as well just flesh this out now. These are not the highest levels of carbon dioxide that Earth has ever known. As a geologist, I was perplexed when I went back. We're about 420 parts per million. Is that higher than it's been in the last 10 years? Yes. 50 years? Yes. 100 years? Yes. Is it higher than it's ever been on Earth? Absolutely not. And that's what we're being led to believe. When you go back and you look in the geologic record during times like the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, we had carbon dioxide levels 1,000 parts per million, 2,000 parts per million, and life was green and lush and thrived on the planet. Also, what's interesting is the temperatures don't always correlate with the CO2. There are times CO2 levels have been sky high where the temperatures were low, and there are just the reverse times where the CO2 levels were low, but the temperatures were high. So there's not a direct correlation that is being, they're trying to make that correlation as leverage for social change. And rather than just being honest about the change, we need to adapt to the climate change. Where it's a problem is that we built a society under the false premise that climate is static, that it would never change. So, you build a 30-story condominium 10 feet from the edge of the ocean and assume the ocean's always going to be 10 feet away.
Right.
And, it makes no sense. Real geologists understand this. Unfortunately, science has been hijacked, and now it's been politicized, and now it's been weaponized. And this is to the point. It's been weaponized to the degree that young people have been led to demonize carbon on all levels. Carbon they equate with bad. I don't think those young people would want to live in the modern world one day without the use of carbon in their lives. We have over 6,000, an average of about 6,000 applications every day in our lives that could not happen if carbon was not playing a role. Even the solar panels that are running this studio, the silica to make those solar panels does not occur naturally. It has to be manufactured under high heat that is only possible through fossil fuels right now, unless we get 0-point energy or hydrogen fusion or something like that. So the net carbon output to produce the solar panels and the frames around the solar panels and all of the things that go into that, and the way food is produced on a mass scale, the technology we're using right now, we wouldn't have this technology if carbon was not. If we took carbon out of the loop, I wouldn't be doing this conversation with you. We wouldn't have the computer to do this with. And a lot of people don't understand that. So they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So that was a little digression, but the point is our young people are being taught that carbon is bad, and the human body, being a carbon-based form of life, is bad, and so it needs to be replaced. And there's a thinking that underlies that. If without understanding the deep truth of the potential and the origin, and we're going to get into this a little bit, of the human body, there's a tendency there's no reason to honor the gift of the body. And it is only through the body that we have access to our divinity. So biology is necessary for divinity. Neurons, DNA, cell membranes are necessary. There's a direct link, spiritual link between the human body and our ability, divinity, to transcend perceived limitations. So let's talk a little bit more about divinity. What are examples of divinity? Rather than thinking of it as some peripheral experience, is the essence of what makes us human. It's our ability to imagine, our imagination, creativity, innovation, our ability to have empathy and sympathy and compassion, forgiveness, the ability to love. These are all expressions of human divinity. So when you take those out of our lives, is that the kind of world that we want to live in? Where we've lost the ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, where we no longer are willing to be the originators of the ideas, where we turn to AI to innovate for us and to create for us. And you're already seeing the beginnings of this happen, right? When I'm not doing what I'm doing now, I'm a musician. And this is a big topic in the music industry right now. Because if a musician can turn to AI and say, hey, write me a song, and then the song's done, they say, hey, write me some music to go with that song, and then they enter that into the Grammys, and now humans that have studied and accomplished musical skills and talents for years or decades are now competing with a computer chip. Is that ethical? And this is a conversation that many people are having right now. And a lot of musicians are not fully forthcoming about what role AI has played in their creations. So it's a really interesting time, when we see all of these things happening right now.
It is. And I think I want to dive into DNA because I think that's the translation is something that is fascinating when I heard it. It's a fractal antenna. It goes so much deeper than most people are aware of.
Yeah.
And for the DNA, if it holds a language, people are unaware of that language. How can it help us? How can that give us an understanding of why our DNA and why our humanness is so important?
Okay, to answer that, I'm going to take a half step back, and we're going to address another topic that will lead right into that. I think it'll kind of bridge everything. With your permission, is that okay? If we
Absolutely, always.
It's a dance, my brother. I'm following your lead. I just want to honor you and our community. By the way, it's the first time you and I have worked together, and I just want to thank you for trusting me with your community. For some people, this is right up their alley, and I fully acknowledge for some people, this is a very, very different way of thinking, not always supported in the mainstream. And I'll tell you right now, if you go out and try to Google or Wikipedia some of the things I'm saying, they're not going to be supported. And I wouldn't expect them to be, because the Google and the Wikipedia are scouring the global database of what we've accepted. And the narratives that have been driven through the algorithms that have led us to certain conclusions, while omitting the full complement of the information. That's why it's dangerous to rely solely on Wikipedia it didn't used to be that way, but that's the way it is now. I saw an interview over the weekend, one of the former co-founders of Wikipedia, and he was asking people to rethink their support of Wikipedia, because it is not what it was designed to do. The algorithms have changed it and are driving people to a mass consensus that is socially acceptable, while omitting a lot of things that are actually true. So we have to ask, do we want truth, or do we want what everybody agrees on? And I guess as a society, we have to make that decision. So I'm going to go back where I would typically, we kind of jumped in. I was happy to follow your lead, and I'm glad we did. But we kind of jumped into the middle of a conversation, and I didn't lay the foundation to really bring this together. And what I'd like to do is to do that now, and then that will lead us into the answer about the DNA. So I'm a systems thinker. I'm a scientist, a degreed earth scientist, a geologist by degree, with a multidisciplinary background: math, physics, computer science, archaeology, cosmology. And I say that because it's that multidisciplinary background that allows us to have these conversations. As a systems thinker, when I look at the world, it looks crazy. The world looks like chaos. It looks like it's just coming apart at the seams for no apparent reason. But there are reasons. It's not random. There is a structure. There is a process. And we are in a process that we are rarely led to understand. And I think that's one of the ways to honor our community, is to help them not dwell on it, but to recognize the structure and the process, so they can see how the events of their lives fit into that. Does that make sense if I say it that way?
100%.
So So I'm going to go back, and there's so many ways to go into this. We are immersed in a fundamental battle that many people discount. It is a battle between what we would typically call light and dark, or good and evil. Now, I don't think anybody denies good and evil, but they don't often recognize the role that it plays in our lives. As a scholar, I'll just say I'm going to go way back. When I began studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, once they were released in the early 1990s, and you can't make this up. This is the way it happened. In Qumran is where the scrolls were discovered. 11 caves in Qumran, in the Dead Sea of what is now Israel and near Jordan. In those 11 caves were the oldest records of the Old Testament that were found preserved in clay vases that had been, my camera's over here, clay vases that had been sealed over time. And it was interesting because it was in the very first cave and the first vase and the first scroll that today is colloquially called the War, W-A-R, it's called the War Scroll, that gives us insights into what's happening in our world today. And that scroll literally says that we are in the midst of a battle between what the scroll identifies as the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Now, I mentioned this in a live event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman very offended at the gender terminology. And they weren't thinking about gender 2,500 years ago the way we are today.
Yeah.
So it had a different significance. So the sons of man is all inclusive of humankind, male and female. It's not just men. But it's the battle between good and evil. And this is a very real battle. This is not a metaphor. When I was a kid growing up, we used to joke about good and evil. You know, the red devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and the conversations they were having back and forth. But evil has many expressions. There is biological evil. There's technological evil. There is psychological evil that is playing out through the algorithms in our social media, leading us to believe things that divide us as families and communities and societies and nations as a planet. That's a form of evil. So there are many forms of evil. And I want to say this because when we talk about divinity, evil and divinity have a very interesting relationship. And now that we have defined divinity, divinity is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. All right. Divinity is what frees us from fear. Divinity is what empowers us to be the best version of ourselves. Divinity is what allows us to transcend the hurt and the trauma of the past. Divinity is what allows us to love without fear, to create and innovate and share with other people, share our ideas and share our creations. These are all expressions of divinity. Evil, now we're going to do a benchmark definition. Evil is anything that denies us our divinity. The goal of the battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light is to deny humankind their divinity, to keep us locked into the fear, to keep us stuck in the cycles of hate and war and fear and division and separation. So the goal of the battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light is the attempt to deny us or to veil our access to our divinity. All right, so anything that denies us our divinity is an expression of evil. Now we've got a definition we can work with. Now you look at what's happening in the world today. The movement to replace our biology with technology is an expression of evil because it denies us access to our divinity. Divinity is a part of us that's timeless. It's ancient. It doesn't live in ourselves. This is what's key. And I want to do this before we get into the DNA. Divinity doesn't live. It's a part of us that doesn't live in the body. I'm going to share this is a kind of a mind-blowing experiment that really helps to illustrate this process. The year 2022, scientists performed an experiment, and the experiment's cool, but what the mind blower to me is that they would even have the insight to put the time and the energy into performing the experiment. Somebody had to think and have a suspicion, and then use the experiment to prove that suspicion. So here's what they did. They took some human neurons that were not attached to a body. So these are just neurons in a petri dish. They were alive. And they built a special computer chip that had little ports, little openings, where the dendrites from anybody that's ever seen a neuron, you've got the mass in the middle of the neuron, and then you've got some people call them tentacles.
Yep.
So they took those little tentacles and they were able to plug those into the ports. So now you've got a biology technology interface. You've got neurons in a computer chip. There was a game that was developed, and I remember this really well. I was working, I just started one of my first corporate jobs, 1972. And the game was called Pong, P-O-N-G. And I know some of your viewers are probably old enough or they've read about it. It was a very primitive computer game, one of the first computer games. It looks boring today. All it was doing, it was like tennis on the computer screen. There was a net in the middle, and there was a little puck. It was a little rectangle, and you would move with your cursor. You would move a little object up and down the side to try to catch that and bounce it back to the other side. And that people would spend hours just mesmerized by Pong. Okay. So in this experiment, they hooked the neuron to the computer chip. The computer chip they placed into a computer loaded with the old game of Pong. And to their amazement, some of the scientists' amazement, these neurons began playing Pong successfully. They knew how to play the game. And the longer they played the game, the better they got. The neurons were learning as they were playing the game. Now, this poses a problem to scientists because they're saying, okay, how does a neuron in a petri dish know how to play Pong? Where are the instructions? Are they embedded in the neuron? If you open that neuron, are you going to find a little instruction book in there for Pong? And the answer to that question illustrates the power of biology and divinity. The instructions are not in the Pong or in the neuron. The neuron, and this is a very different way of thinking about tissue. The neuron is literally a soft biological antenna that tunes to the place in the field that underlies all existence that scientists now know and acknowledge. Beginning in 2012, they acknowledge there's a field of energy and information that underlies all existence. That's not a metaphor. It's not New Age thinking. It's not hypothetical. The CERN superconducting super collider actually made the announcement in July. Oh, it was on the 4th of July here in America. 4th of July, the year 2012 is when they made that announcement. So the neurons in the petri dish are the antenna that tune to the place in the field where Pong, the information of Pong, resides. The neurons and the DNA and the cell membranes in our bodies are also biological antenna that tune to the place in the field where our divinity lives. Our memories live in that field. And this actually, it goes a long way to answer a lot of questions. I lost my mom to COVID during COVID, but she was in the midst of late stage dementia as well. And I watched her go through. It wasn't Alzheimer's, it was a different form of dementia. And I watched her go through this process. And it was amazing it would have been amazing, except it was my mom. And so I was feeling, for my mom. But if I could be objective and watch the process, you're actually seeing the antenna fail to connect with the field.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is that's happening. Now, in my mom's case, I want to leave people with a good feeling. when my mom left this world, she was a really happy woman because she had forgotten everything that ever hurt her in her life. She was a product of World War II. You know, they went through all the things that happened in Europe during World War II. I mean, she had a lot of hurt in her life, and she always said she just wanted to forget all the pain. And, there's a school of thought that says what we say is a command to the body, that the body will take that literally. And so in dementia, literally what's happening is the body's producing chemicals to absorb the signal so it can't get to the field. And in that way, meeting my mom's desire to be a happy woman and to forget the pain and suffering. That's a path. Another path is to heal the pain and the suffering so that you don't have to forget it. And Mom and I had long conversations about that. And it wasn't her path. And I loved her and I respected and supported her choices. But the point of all this conversation is that our biology is the link in this, at least in this world, in this earth realm. And maybe in other worlds it's different. But if you're living here on earth, your carbon-based biology is the antenna that tunes you to your divinity so that you can express your love and your care and your empathy and sympathy and compassion and imagination and creativity and forgiveness and all of those things. You can't do it without the biology. When we replace our biology with synthetics, we lose access to our divinity. By definition, that is a form of evil. It's an expression of evil. So now we're seeing this race to the year 2030, when the powers that be are jockeying to be in the best position for the events that unfold in the year 2030, the cosmological events, whatever the upheavals. There's a whole conversation that we can have around that. They want to be in the best position. And to accomplish that, we as a society now are being driven to remake the world and to remake our lives before that 2030 date. It all comes down to a lot of centralization of power and control run by AI, artificial intelligence, large databases that are already created pretty much right now separately. It's about bringing those databases together, and it's a way of living that is not natural. It's not healthy for us. It's not good for us. So you have to say, who's it good for? It's another conversation. So the book Pure Human is a celebration of our humanness, and it's an invitation. Hopefully, when someone reads even a part of the book, they come away with a deeper appreciation for the gift of their humanness. And I'm going to answer the question about the message in the DNA that I think really seals that deal. But even more than an appreciation, my hope is that the reader comes away with a sense of pride. I am proud to be human, and I'm proud of what our potential is. We have been deceived because in essence, we are a good species, and we are a benevolent species based in cooperation. We've been driven to hate, and we've been driven to fear and to believe that we live in a world of separation. That's the deception. Yeah. And so my hope is that before we give away the essence of our humanness, that we wake up to our potential and embrace our divinity as the gift that it is. When we do that, what happens is the world outside of us begins to reflect that. The way we use technology will reflect those beliefs that we have about ourselves. We think we're powerless victims, then we will build technology to replace what we think we can't do. But when we embrace our divinity, then the technology will serve and support life in the world and life in our bodies. And that's a very, very different path. So I wanted to say those things. And you asked specifically about DNA. There is a chapter 2 in this book, and there's an entire book dedicated to what I'm about to say that was released in the year 2004. So this is I I released this material years ago, and I'm re-releasing with some new understandings. When I was in the corporations I was a senior computer systems designer for a company now called Martin Marietta. Now it's called Lockheed Martin. Then it was called Martin Marietta Defense Systems. And my job was writing pattern recognition software. And this is just the way the universe works. That was my job. It's the first time computers had been brought onto a desktop from a big room. They all used to be in big rooms. It was also the first time that DNA could be programmed onto a computer screen that you could actually look at. And the first time I looked at the human genome, I knew it wasn't random. I said, this is organized. There's structure. There are patterns here. And as a pattern recognition software designer, I could see that. And that launched me on a path to cross traditional boundaries between linguistics, ancient languages, genetics, chemistry, and biology to understand what could have been coded into the DNA of the first humans that emerged 200,000 years ago. And their genome is in our bodies. We carry the message that they brought 200,000 years ago. And to make a long story really brief, there is a mathematic link between the chemical codes that make DNA and the letters that make what are called the core or root alphabets of cuneiform Sanskrit. Well, cuneiform is not an alphabet, it's a writing system, but it is linked to Arabic, to Sanskrit, and to Biblical Hebrew. These are called four core or root languages. And I'm saying this because there is a message in our DNA, and you can read that message in any one of those four languages. It's so universal. It will work in any of those languages. When you find the number linked to a letter of the ancient alphabets, and that same number is linked to the chemical code in the DNA, now they're interchangeable. And when you perform those operations following the rules that were laid down in a 2nd century manuscript described in the book, what we find is there is a literal message encoded into the DNA of every cell of our bodies. And that message literally reads as the words, God eternal within the body. God eternal within the body. It doesn't say who God is. God and eternal are interchangeable in this way. It could be God within the body. It could be eternal within the body. And it translates the same in every one of those languages. And once I did this, I did it manually at first. And I asked a statistician friend of mine, I said, could this be luck? Could it be a fluke? And they did the random numbers. I think the numbers, I didn't know we were going to do this, but I think the numbers 0.00042% that this is a fluke, indicating that it appears to be intentional.
Yes.
And it supports what geneticists are now finding is that the human genome is not random. There's an intentionality. The mutations that make us who we are, that were present when we showed up 200,000 years ago, happened all at the same time in a brief period of time, not slowly, gradually over a long period of time, randomly. That implies intentionality, and intentionality suggests purpose. So it's a very different way for some people to look at the human body. And this is a nuanced conversation. I'm a geologist. I believe in evolution because I've seen it in the fossil record. When I was doing my field work, I've seen it for plants, animals, insects. I've seen it for primates. It breaks down. Darwin's theory of evolution breaks down when it comes to humans specifically. Something happened to us 200,000 years ago that cannot be accounted for. And the scientists tell you this. They say the fusion of two chromosomes to make chromosome number 2, for example, or the switch in chromosome 7 that makes it possible for us to sing and have complex speech. Those could not have happened randomly and all at the same time. The odds of that happening, like I said, are, let me put it this way. Scientists say when the odds of something happening are 1 in 10 to the 400th power, so 400 is the exponent, they say that's impossible. The odds of our DNA forming the way it is formed, scientists say, is 1 in 10 to the 600th power. So if 1 in 10 to the 400 is impossible, 1 in 10 to the 600 means it's more than impossible that we are the product of random mutations, lucky biology over a long period of time. So I'm saying this, who are we? Each human has about 50 trillion, an average human, about 50 trillion cells in the body. And the nucleus of every one of those cells, the message is encoded. If we forget who we are, we need look no further than the 50 trillion cells inside of our bodies, beyond our beliefs, our sexuality, our gender, our race, the color of our skin, our anything. When we think that our differences are so great that we have to hurt and destroy one another to solve our problems, we need look no further than the message encoded into every one of our cells to remind us that we are God eternal within the body. Now, this gets really interesting because for those who like to come at this from a biblical perspective, this actually is supported. If you look at 1 Corinthians 3:16, and it may be in the 17, but it's definitely 3:16, where the prophet is saying, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells within you. Well, that means one thing to certain people. But the idea of the body of a temple is almost universal in indigenous traditions, that we house something sacred. Now, as an amateur archaeologist, when I was leading groups into Egypt for 20 years and, into Greece and Rome, and we still go into Peru and all those things, when you see ancient temples are built, those temples are usually built in layers. And as you get into the innermost layer is where the deepest secrets and the greatest mysteries of that temple are housed. And it has a name. It's called the Holy of Holies. So, for example, in the Hebrew traditions, the Ark of the Covenant was held in the Holy of Holies. In the Greek traditions, they had a Holy of Holies, depending on what God you were dealing with. Well, if we are a temple, does that mean that we have a Holy of Holies? And the answer is we have not one, but we have 50 trillion Holy of Holies, because the nucleus of every cell holds the message, God eternal within the body, telling us who we are. And I think perhaps one of the greatest lessons that we can take from all of this is our role, our job in this lifetime is to protect and preserve the gift of the temple of the body. And that means to be conscious of how we use the body. How do we nourish the body? And how do we speak to the body? And how do we allow other people to speak to us? How do we feel about our own bodies? Do we love our bodies or do we hate our bodies? And if we do hate them, where does that hate come from? And is it validated? And it's a very different way of thinking, but it gives us the reason maybe to think differently, because it's through the body that we have access to our divinity. It's through the body that we have access to the greatest gifts of what it means to be human. The evil that we see in the world today playing out across the board in entertainment, social media, through the food that we eat, the lifestyles we're encouraged to accept, the algorithms on social media, the wars in Ukraine and Israel, and then the 22 other wars where Americans have boots on the ground that nobody hears about right now. All of those, at again, a systems thinker, you go right to the top of this, all of them are expressions of denying us access to our divinity, veiling our divinity. So in this ancient battle between good and evil, how do we win? This is, I think, what people want to hear. And the answer is, this isn't a battle that we want to win. It's a battle because winning implies conflict, the old idea of struggle and conflict.
Yeah.
That's not what we want. We want to triumph. Triumph is different than winning. The way that we triumph over evil, so remember, the goal, this is why we did this earlier, the goal of the evil is to deny our divinity. The way we triumph is to live our divinity, live the best version of ourselves, live our imagination, our creativity, love fearlessly, forgive without any expectation of something coming back because you have forgiven someone. Don't be afraid to innovate and create and take a chance. Don't be afraid to feel empathy and sympathy for another human, because this is where our compassion comes from. When we do those things, we're living our divinity. We have triumphed over evil. It's not that kind of a fight. And I think this is perhaps the deepest spiritual lesson that we're all, that is facing all of us right now. A perfect example, in America, we just came through an election, a very difficult election. The question is, what do we allow the events of the world to make us become? And when we allow the events of the world to drive us to these primal base instincts of hate and revenge and fear, and allow the events of the world to drive the wedge between us and our loved ones and our community and our society, we have succumbed to evil. I think it's good to recognize it, not to judge it, but to recognize, say, yeah, man, I would never be that hateful in a million years, but I find myself in this place. That's the awakening. That's divinity awakening so that we can transcend what it is that we've become. So it's a big conversation, and I wanted to say all of that to kind of wrap it together, and I'm happy to go wherever you want to go with that.
I heard you, I think it was in the new book, you said that we can't separate from our divinity, but we can deny it. And that was something that stuck with me because it seems as though separation is the ultimate lie. It's the ultimate myth that we are sold to in every facet of society, in every way. When it comes to rejecting our divinity, I know we're taught to do it, but why do you think that we reject our divinity so much?
Well, in the book, what I say, this comes from, we do this in the live events a lot.
Yeah.
You are never without your divinity. You always have your divinity. However, you have the ability to deny your divinity, and many people do that. Many people will deny that they have the ability to love and forgive because they've been conditioned out of it. So we're free will beings. We don't have to accept our divinity. So we can deny it. It can be conditioned out of us through society, through our family. I grew up in a rural, my father left my home when I was 10. We were poor before he left. And after he left, we had less than nothing. We were in the hole deep. And I lied about my age, went to work in a factory at an early age. Some people have heard that story before. And what I always heard from my mom was that she didn't feel that we were really worthy of anything beyond what we had, because that was her conditioning. I didn't believe it, but I heard it. If I had believed it, I would have accepted my conditioning. Now, I have a younger brother, 4 years younger. And same parents, we're like night and day. We look different, we think different, we have different philosophies of life. And he did believe everything that he heard. And so he has lived his life within those limitations that he was indoctrinated to accept, and often feels that he's powerless in this world. So he looks to others to empower him. And when they fail to do that, that is a sense, it ignites a sense of fear or anger or issues of self-esteem, things like that. When his divinity is just, it's a belief away. And we've had this conversation, and, you know, he lives his life and I live mine. So we can deny our own divinity, can be conditioned out of us, or it can be veiled through technology. Those are three things that are up for all of us right now. When we replace our biology with technology, you can see where the synthetics, they may perform the earthly function, but they're not performing the communicate. They're not tuned in. They're not dialed in to the field where our memories and our sense of right and wrong and conscience, the synthetics can't do that. So we're being encouraged. Ray Kurzweil is he's a well-known futurist. He is an author. He's a brilliant technologist. He is, I think he's director of AI at Google right now, or one department of AI. He came out with a book earlier this year, well, last year, 2024, called The Singularity. And what he says in that book is that if we do not change our thinking and the trajectory that we're on right now, by the year 2030, within 5 years, when you speak to someone at the grocery store or in a restaurant, you will no longer be speaking to a pure human. You'll be speaking to some degree of hybrid between human machine interface. That hybrid may be AI, might be a chip in the brain. It could be chemicals in the blood that mimic the immune response. That is a form of what we're talking about. He said, unless we change, and by the year 2045, he says we will have reached what he calls the singularity. That is where our lives, every facet of our lives, and the world around us are all being managed in a massive global database that that is run by a massive AI that's already being developed right now. So in other words, every form of life, every giraffe in Africa will have a digital ID. Every fish in the ocean, we have the ability to do that, has a digital ID. Every tree has a digital ID. Every human has a digital ID, and all of our biometrics are part of that digital ID, including our emotions, including our lifestyles, what we eat, where we travel, what we consume, how often we travel. And all of that will be managed through this AI so that when we step outside of the bounds, so let's say, for example, we're in that system. And I've had people say to me, Greg, what's the problem? That sounds like a great system. It's all in the thinking underlying the system. If it is done to unify our global family for peace and to build a great and beautiful world, honoring family and life and humanness, that's one thing. If it is built from a sense of greed, power, and control, centralized authority to limit freedoms, that's a whole different thing. So how could a system like that be abused? Well, an example. I just heard an interview this morning before I clicked into ours. They were having this conversation. So, for example, in this massive AI, let's say I go to the gas station to put gas in my truck, and my credit card is denied because I have already put a tank of gas in, and I'm driving too much. Or I go to the market to buy a certain kind of food. I'm a non-carnivore. I have been all my life. Mm-hmm. But the example that's being given is maybe you pick up a package of chicken and your purchase is declined because you're eating too much chicken, contributing to the carbon output. Or your money. Think of every dollar in every physical dollar. If every physical dollar had an RFID chip in it, and that dollar could have an expiration date where you're forced to spend it, or you're going to lose it, or you spend it on certain things and those things are denied. Those are the kinds of controls that are the concerns for what Ray Kurzweil is talking about in the singularity. To do that requires nations to lose borders. And you're seeing the beginnings of that. The unions, the European Union certainly was a precursor to that, the African Union. Now you're seeing within the last week in the United States rumblings of a North American Union between Canada, Mexico, the United States, common currency, and the use of digital technology, so the borders are no longer necessary. I mean, the technology is there. This is where everything is moving in this centralized direction of regulation and power and control, which is, from my perspective, it's concerning because it doesn't support our humanness. It doesn't support our innovation, our creativity, our ingenuity, our imagination, our freedoms. It's all about containment and constriction. And I think it's like the pendulum has swung so far because all of a sudden the technology is there to implement the ideas for people that have been thinking about this for a very long time. Now you have to step back and look at the big picture. Where does that sit on the spectrum of the battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light? The things that deny us our divinity are an expression of evil. And I think it's good for us to know that so that we can choose wisely, not from anger, but from discernment, and say, you know, these are the things that are good for my family. And these are the things that are good for my body. And this is what I choose to have in my life. And where that collides with policies, that tells us where our homework is. That tells us where we need to rethink the direction that we're allowing ourselves to be led in a kind way. I think it's important to do it in a kind way. A lot of people are angry. They're filled with hate because they've been lied to. Mm-hmm. They're succumbing to the very essence of what it is they hope to triumph over. It's not about that. From my perspective, it's not about that at all.
Right there with you. If we're coming from that place, we're only really feeding into it more in a sense. We have to come from that place of connection, and that separation is going to continue to divide us more and more.
Well, you know, from this perspective, every guest, I have not seen every one of your podcasts. I've seen a number of them, and I love them. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
And from this perspective, every guest now is exploring how to embrace some facet of their divinity. So this is a big conversation that it's all encompassing, whether you're talking about divorces and marriages and relationships, you're talking about finances, if you're talking about Bitcoin or traditional investments, or you're talking about healing the body, you know, you're talking about climate change, saving the planet, you know, refugees, wars, whatever it is. All of these are expressions of us either striving to achieve or powers attempting to deny human divinity. And a lot of it comes from within. Not all of it is from outside of us. We also, through our trauma and through our own emotional damage, that I think is part of life on this planet. No one sane could ever live, fully sane could ever live on Earth. And in the presence of the atrocities and the hurt and the suffering that's in our face every day, we have to rearrange our hearts and our sanity to try to make sense of something that is senseless. You know, there's one of the texts that it was one of the Essene texts that I came across in the 1980s. I think about it a lot. And what it said is the only difference between the angels in the heavens and the angels that walk this earth is that the angels in the heavens remember that they're angels. That implies that we are of an angelic essence who have forgotten who we are or been deceived into relinquishing, giving away our power. God eternal within the body supports that. Many of the ancient texts, not religion, just the texts, tell us that. And if that is true, and I'm not saying it is, I personally believe it is, but I'm also open to, I'm not an expert on the ancient texts. If it is true, what I know is that we as angels in this world were never meant to see the things that we have seen with our eyes. And we've never meant to hear many of the things that we have heard with our ears and with our bodies, and that we struggle to find a way to have those experiences and to keep going in life. Because if we didn't, I think we would be incapacitated if we really allowed the depth of the hurt and the suffering and the atrocities to really penetrate to the core of our souls. I don't know that we could continue. So we have to find a way to a story that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell one another, and as we love and support one another, we have to find a way to move forward to create a world where those things no longer exist. And that is the triumph of the sons of light over the sons of darkness, or the triumph of the good over evil. It's just a perspective. It's another perspective. So now that we did the preliminaries, where would you like to go with this?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I hope we do a part 2. This has to happen. This has been exceptional. There's a billion more questions I could ask you, but I'll ask you the last question I ask every guest.
Ask me one more.
Okay. My question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Unlearning. I have a little bit different perspective on that. I think every belief that I've ever embraced was based on what I understood to be true in the moment, and when the evidence shows me that belief no longer serves me, I will adapt, modify, upgrade. But I don't think I ever want to unlearn anything. I cherish everything I've ever learned, and it is in my conscious library, my repertoire of what makes me, has led me to be who I am. Everyone's had a tough life. My childhood was the product of a very dysfunctional abusive alcoholic father, and it wasn't fun at the time. Looking back on that, what I learned from that informed me and helped me to move in directions that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I no longer have the same beliefs, but I cherish those experiences, and I would never want to lose them. I wouldn't want to forget them. So from my perspective, and I understand what you're saying, I wouldn't want to unlearn anything. What I choose is to really drop the limits in terms of what I personally have accepted as possible in my life, or what I've been conditioned or indoctrinated as a human to accept in my life. And I think if we're ever going to do it, now is the time. Now is the time. I don't want anybody to hold back. Step forward and step into our humanness, embrace our power, embrace our love. Together, we're going to love this world. We're going to love this world into the peace that we know is possible. And to do that, we have to embrace the deep truth of our divinity. So I think it's more about accepting a deeper potential rather than unlearning or forgetting anything in the past. From my perspective, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love it. And what you said earlier about the book, feeling like a need of a sense of pride after you read it. I wouldn't say it's just pride. I would say that it in this whole conversation, in a sense, is kind of a through line of it, but it's a sense of responsibility to be a part of that solution.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. There is so much power that comes with our divinity. Divinity is our ability to interact with the stuff our world is made of and within our own bodies in a conscious and responsible way, rather than offloading that, to someone else and blaming someone else when things don't go well. There is a responsibility that comes with accepting human divinity, and some people are up for it now. Some people, this conversation may not make sense to them right now. So what I'd like to say to people is that everything we're doing in your mind, just have a little file folder called possibilities, and dump this whole conversation into possibilities and live the life we've ever lived it, here's what's going to happen. The world's changing. And every one of us, life is going to bring to our doorstep a situation where the remedies that we learned in the past no longer fit because the world changed. And the moment that happens, let those old belief systems go, bless them and let them go because they served us so well. Come to that file folder of possibilities. And I will bet you that the conversation we're having now takes on a whole new meaning and makes a whole lot of sense. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Gregg, all of your links and everything will be in the show notes, of course, but where would you like to direct people?
James, I'd like to direct people into their hearts is what I'd like to do, because that's really where divinity begins. If you want to find out what I'm doing to lead people into their hearts, my website, of course, Gregg Braden, 2Gs, GreggBraden.com. My mom did that intentionally. Two G's means it's Greg and not a Gregory. 1G is an abbreviation. And it'll tell you about all the live events. I am co-presenting with some dear friends, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Anita Morjani, Dr. Sue Morter, actually coming up next week. That's pretty fast. But I co-present a lot. We lead people into amazing places, Peru, Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, Canyon de Chelly, places right here in the desert Southwest. So, James, you should come and check out this part of the country if you've never been here. It's a whole new world from where you are. And
I
if you
absolutely
get,
will.
I'm in the studio just outside of Santa Fe. If you get anywhere near me, give me a call, and I will sweep you up in my big, beautiful black Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck, and we'll go on an adventure, a road trip.
Hey, you're giving me. Sounds good. I will see you then.
All right, brother.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for trusting me with your community. I look forward to our next. Thank you so much.